Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Chris Rainey, co-founder here at HR Leaders, and I'll be your host for today's live panel discussion where we're going to be talking about navigating talent experience. Let me introduce you to our amazing panelists. We've got Yaz Ahmad, who's the Global Vice President of Mobility, Talent and Rewards at HelloFresh. Mauricio Chapa, who's the Vice President of Talent and Compensation at Sigma. Kason Morris, who's the Head of Global Internal Talent Marketplace, Skills and Mobility at Allstate. And last but not least, Julie Asselin, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at 365 Talents. Nice to see everyone and some familiar faces here. It's funny that our icebreaker question is pretty difficult, so I'm going to pick on Yaz first and talk about Yaz. Why is skills intelligence so important, and what does it mean to you and your organization?
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here, firstly, and thank you for the question. Difficult one. My mind immediately went blank, and I was like, good question. For our organization, well, for any organization, I think skills intelligence almost is like the heartbeat. You need to have, it helps you with adapting to changing market demands. So in an era where we're constantly changing what we need and the shifting of markets, understanding the current skill sets of employees, identifying those skill sets is essential for an organization's ability to adapt and remain competitive. You got talent optimization, so kind of identifying where in the organization are there gaps if you're regionally based. So for us as HelloFresh, we've got teams all around the world, so it's very important to us to know, okay, let's say it's logistics, skill sets that we need, or someone who's operationally analytical. We need skill sets maybe in the US versus in the UK. So understanding your talent optimization, learning and development opportunities, understanding where we will need to double down and invest in the future. It helps with better data decision making. It's a very difficult icebreaker question.
Well, considering your mind went blank, you've done pretty well. as a reply. I'll be quiet and let the rest of the panelists jump in, but thanks for kicking us off.
I'm happy to jump in next. I would say skills are a catalyst for change. It isn't that's necessarily like a silver bullet solution, but it plays a pivotal role in all of the talent management and talent development practices that are accelerators to our progress. So when I think about the importance of skills intelligence, to the point that Yaz made earlier about having dexterity, it's really about, by having good intelligence, we're able to move with speed, precision, and like infuse energy from a data-driven lens into like organizational talent decisions. I feel like when organizations decide to invest in intelligence, you then can become a strategic partner to the rest of the HR organization, whether it's acquisition, whether it's learning and development, whether it's leader development and succession. And then in turn, you're able to add value to the organization holistically across the enterprise. So to me, that's the underpinning power of skill intelligence.
Very similar in adding up to what Jazz and Kason mentioned. So if talent, I think very cliche to hear, it's our people, the most important, asset or thing in our company. So if talent is the most important part of a company, and it's actually the key enabler that makes things happen in any organization, leveraging or understanding its skills, it's like looking what you have under the hood. And it's really like truly understanding what do you have, where you're standing in order to have the capacity to address the challenges and goals that you're placing as an organization. So really not looking into that and thinking of skills is the best way to go molecular in it and really understanding, go deep on the topic. And then you can actually do things that are more precise and more effective, that will help you to really enable the organization to reach whatever you're looking for.
To me, just to give a different point of view, I think everyone agrees that skills intelligence is super important, and I'm sure I'm opening up to what's coming next. But it's The how is super important. How do you capitalize on those skills, on everything you've uncovered when you know them? The how is super important. So knowing, the skills you have, it takes a lot of things, in terms of project mindset within the company to understand that. So you need to be a really good advocate for skills, and then how you will make sure this is fully understood by the full company, from employees, from key stakeholders to HRs, managers, the why those are important. We need to all, as HRs, to be super convinced and really to preach, the whole skills mindset. So yeah, super interesting to and completely agree with the panel.
I would just like to add that it's said very easily, right? But like many things, easier said than done. And the risk of not doing it is really high. And a lot of organizations, I think, are very advanced on it. A lot of us are on the path.
Oh, great. And I think as we all move towards being skills-based organizations, you kind of have to have that data in order to be competitive and be able to pivot, right? We're kind of seeing there's no such thing anymore of this 3-5 year plan. Those things change pretty quickly. So in order to be agile and be competitive, you have to understand which of those skills exist in your organizations and in order to stay competitive as well. So love this. Considering that was a icebreaker, I think everyone did pretty well on that. Let us know in the chat how everyone did. Mauricio, in the context of workforce development, what are some effective approaches that you're taking to identifying and cultivating skills that are adaptable on a global scale?
So one thing that we faced, and let me just say something and to empathize, so probably many people out there are starting or are pretty advanced in this journey. As I mentioned before, the important thing is that we all get started and we're all going to face challenges. And I would like to start talking about some of the challenges that you face. You realize that the concepts and the fundamentals are not aligned globally. Sometimes what you understand by talent, by any given skill, or by potential could be pretty different in different culture settings, or because of the history or different background of each company that has, in a company like ours that has grown through acquisition. So agreeing on that and speaking the same language and aligning the organization, I think it's key. It's the first thing that we really need to do, so we are aligned on what we're looking for, and when we say something, we mean the same thing. It sounds kind of obvious, but it's not necessarily what happens. And without that, then you're going to be misaligned, and then you won't have a detailed skills approach or skills-based management that will help you to be more effective and efficient in your decisions. And then 3 key pillars, I think: process, technology, and people. So aligning those 3, and so in defining what are the processes that you're going to follow, and to what are the inputs that you're going to get for that, and what are you going to feed with these concepts in the future, and how are you going to fuel the organization to work with these concepts, new concepts that you're going to be working with. The picking on which technology. I was in a forum a few weeks back. There's a ton of options. They could all work. It seems like everything is in the process of building. There's no end products yet, at least from what I've seen. There's a lot of things to continue to be built. So you really have to choose what fits you best in terms of technology. It has to be the right one for you, and understand where people is. And we'll go back to skills, even though you don't have the technology yet or a lot of things installed. Whatever you have at a certain point, realize and clarify what skills you need to build up this language and this project and these processes across your organization, no matter if it's local, global, or what size of it. And then once you have this really aligned, I would go with the communication piece and generating ownership with the people, because I think the skills-based management is not an HR piece, is also has to be embedded and owned by everybody in the organization. And then us HR people provide the tools and the ecosystem for it to flourish. So I would go about that, and definitely all of this is sustained and leveraged with the right technology, because otherwise we're back 100 years ago. I don't know if that answers the
No,
question.
that was a great job. Yeah, I'd love to. Kason, what are your thoughts?
I think a lot of what was said definitely resonates. I think of skills intelligence, when I compare it to sort of thinking about financial data in the world. Like financial data has been around for a long time. It's been mature. Skills data is very new. And my camera keeps having a challenge, but we're going to work that out. So
technology.
That being said, when it comes to building your skills strategy, the way I evangelize it is think about it like a chassis to a car. Because there's so many emerging technologies, there is no one size, to Yaz's point, there's no one size fits all. So if you think about the chassis, that chassis is essentially your culture and the mindset shifts that need to be in place, and then some of the core technologies that you're going to have to use in order to do the work. But then last but not least, it's also understanding the work, understanding what kind of work you're doing today, and then what work you want to do in the future, and allowing those things to inform, what technologies you buy to support that and what skills you need to actually do it. So from my seat, I think about it in 3 tenets. It's like, how do we best know our talent in relation to the skills we have today and what we want to do in the future? How do we grow our talent? So now that we have an understanding of those skills, do we build those skills up? Do we buy those skills in the external market? Do we borrow them from across the business? Do we bot them using emerging technologies? And then how do you connect your talent through a digital ecosystem like an internal talent marketplace, where essentially people can grow and get to know each other, get aligned on skills, and create communities of practice that keep them engaged in how the business runs.
Okay, so when you're thinking about technology, and as you said, there's no one size fits all, what questions are you asking yourself, or what are some of the considerations that you're looking at to decide which is the best solution for you and the business?
It's a great question. It's about the maturity of the organization. Every organization's in a different stage. So for example, if you have a global organization, and for the record, my camera may cut out again, but I'm coming back.
We're working through it. I love the fact that camera's overheating because it's hearing all of the great insights. It can't handle it.
So we're definitely working through it. But to answer the question, for the example of having a global organization, to the point that was made earlier, organizations that may be from acquisitions that run on different systems, right? So when I think about the technologies, some of the questions that I think about is like, well, if we're bringing people together and we're working on skill intelligence, are people working on the same systems? I've been in scenarios where they're the same instances of using like Microsoft. They're the same HCMs, but in different instances across the business. So you try to look at where your data flow and your functional architecture, what it looks like, and then start to figure out what are the strategic consolidations that you can make to help with establishing your talent intelligence foundation. So if you do that thoughtfully, that way it's not done in a silo, and it can serve the larger scalable vision of the organization. But sometimes you have to start small within a certain region, a certain function, but then build into that logic of how can you do it at scale, and how can you partner with the CTOs and the other organizational parties to create that synergy across the architecture of technology.
I've seen it with our customers where we have it 2 ways. It's either people decide, okay, I want to go globally and I'm going to integrate, the technology, the skills intelligence engine or tool inside all my HR system, and I just put it in it, and it's another element, but it's going to be flawless, and I just roll out to everyone. That's something we've done for the railway system in France, where they just decided, okay, we need 150,000 people to be on the system. Let's roll out, and it's one day and you get 150,000 people on the platform and they just do communications. And the other way, which I feel is more the normal way of how you roll something, is just you start by one region or one BU, and then you build yourself up to okay, this is how I build a project. And I can see Kason nodding because it's probably how you did it. You want to be agile and you want to have that kind of pilot project, prove the value to everyone, and then once you're convinced that your first region rolls, then you roll across other regions, and you'll probably adapt your communication plans. But this is how I see it. So it's either you do one fits all and you just do that massive rollout, or you do the step-by-steps for the regions, right? Everyone's nodding. So,
yeah, no words needed. You mentioned it just earlier, and also Mauricio mentioned it earlier, communications. And I want to touch on that for a sec, because I feel like that's the part where companies don't spend enough time and attention, and kind of realize later the technology parts are easier, but the cultural transformation and the communication is actually the part they don't consider enough and spend enough time on. So I want to jump into that. I saw some more people nodding on that. Yes. What are some of the strategies that you've used in the past to promote global mobility amongst employees that have worked well for you?
There was some really good points there, and it just got me thinking about some stuff we do. And there's one thing I really like to do, but we don't do, and I'll mention that as well. So just off the first thing we do to prep global mobility is double down on training. So learning and development trainings, self-learning trainings, just kind of focusing on programs that help people understand or explore new skill sets they're not necessarily doing at the moment. The second is we have mentorship programs that are just kind of introducing people to new team members, where if you're in an organization that's been around for a long time, you can very quickly become very cliquey within your team and not explore other team members or get to know other people. And then we have leadership programs as well, which is kind of your fast stream programs or your future leader programs that help people kind of explore what their future looks like. And this is all about prepping people for internal mobility. The second is around just internal talent marketplaces or talent portals, really finding a place where someone can identify short-term projects, part-time roles, full-time positions, and just apply. So your internal job board. And then you have the more strategic view of it, which you would see in your consulting companies, your BCGs, Accentures, etc., where they have like a bench or workforce planning and say, okay, from a business strategic perspective, we need to double down on these skill sets because we're making these big bets. So we have these high demand skills in different regions, and encouraging employees to drive those trainings, either self-learning or force them through. Obviously, you have to have good mobility policies in place. So offering flexible global mobility options, including short-term assignments, rotational programs, which allow employees to gain like international experience or even cross-department experience. But those all happened organically, right? So I just mentioned 6 things there. The 7th thing, which I think is missing, and I find it's a very human thing, is something I've done in Wipro and I'm trying to do here, but it seems like it's impossible, but internal headhunting. So I mean like the raw internal headhunting. I mean picking up the phone saying, Chris, I've got a job for you. And you say, am I in trouble? I say, no, you're not in trouble. I've actually got a job for you. It's in Australia. Would you be interested? And your manager not having a say if I can reach out to you. So typically with internal mobility processes, the manager has to know before you apply. What if you just cut that out and just said, no, everybody's fair game as long as they've done 12 months within the company? So those are the things we've done, and that's where I see like the more human element of it, just treating people the same way we treat external candidates.
Yeah, can I make a point to what Yas just said? I think that's super well said. When I think about the manager and the leader mindset around mobility, one of the framings I've used is how do we get managers to become net exporters of talent? So part of their success is not just about how good their talent is and how they get their work done, but how they're growing people and how they're allowing people to move dynamically in the organization. And to your point, the culture and the mindset shift of having the internal marketplace mirror external, meaning it doesn't need approval, that is just based on the agency of the individual, I think is a very, very powerful proposition for the success of an internal mobility and the agility that you can create in an organization. But in order for that to be successful, that goes back to the point made earlier around the culture. You really got to invest and buy into that culture and get people building trust into that idea in order for it to work.
I couldn't agree more on some of the comments mentioned today. And this is also why building a skills-based management or a skills-based company, it's so important because a lot of the times we operate with labels or we decide very much on the surface or with trends. For example, this individuals that are from this bucket usually evolve to these buckets. But when you decompose in skills and you really understand what's going on and see the relations, and it's sort of like fragmented, and then you see that it's not, there's more similarities that are visible in the surface to many other buckets. And then when you realize where the supply and demand is for skills in your company, as Zara was mentioning, these marketplaces, and you create as a company the right context and environment for the skills development, then the effort is more efficient. You don't have to develop that many things. It doesn't seem that big. It's more precise. And so again, is getting that defined clearly, understood. And then you also provide ownership to the individuals in the organization, and you create more options, more visibility. And then people are more engaged, more excited because there are, all of a sudden, then you realize that you can go further than what you thought.
Seeing a lot of that happening in the HR space, actually. So I recently interviewed the CHRO of L'Oreal, and she had never worked a day in HR, worked her entire career in R&D in L'Oreal, and is now the chief people officer because of those transferable skills to that point, right?
Yes.
A few weeks back before that, I was speaking to Lego's chief HR officer, Lauren, came from within the sales side of Lego, and now chief people officer because those transferable skills. Both of those people have been with those companies for a very long time, 10 years, 15 years plus, because they've had multiple careers in those organizations and have been excited about the challenge to evolve. Are they going to have every skill that you need? No, of course. There's going to be some growth and development along the way. But if you look at any company who's retaining employees very well, most of them are skills-based organizations who are seeing that talent exists, and they're working in sprints, right? They're working in small assignments and projects. They've got rid of hierarchy in many ways. And also they're rewarding those leaders for the ones that export talent, to the point that Kason mentioned, from talent importers to talent exporters. That's part of their, part of how they're rewarded as leaders as well, right? Whereas the traditional way was, hey, get away from my talent, go away from my team.
I think that's
shift.
That's a very crucial thing. Talent has to be, I think, in my personal opinion, aligned and owned by the company to achieve the goals of the company as a whole. And then a problem that doesn't only affect in terms of talent, but also in many results is silos in the organization. It's very common. We all live by it because then it has to do also with how we incentivize and how the mechanisms that we use, and then sometimes we systematically provoke these things happening. But one of the starting points can be this skills-based and owning or having that freedom, creating these marketplaces or this environment when you allow talent to grow, and everybody has an eager desire to continue to develop. And then also the other piece of understanding, as I think Kason was mentioning, or Jazar, what your company needs to be doing in the future. And sometimes when you're doing skills-based management, you realize that is not the usual suspects that are going to go and do that. The skills, you probably will find them in a different place. So that's, that helps us to think differently.
I want to add to that, Chris, because to both your points, there was, I don't know if you know Lena Nair. She used to be the Unilever CHRO, and she's now the CEO of Chanel. That's a great example. And she was there for, I think, 20
years plus. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
No, it's a great example. What a fantastic example that you shared. And even Lena will tell you she had multiple careers. In fact, this week I was interviewing Unilever's chief diversity officer who was in town from America. And I said, hey, how did you go from this role to chief diversity officer? And she said, I sat down with Lena and Lena asked me, where do you want to be, right? Where do you want to go from now? She's never done a day of work in D&I in her life before. And they kind of sat down and discussed, the skills required, the experience, etc. And now she's in that role and still very excited to be working at Unilever in her role. So it's super important.
I think you're just highlighting something that's important, because we're talking about skills, and knowing the skills intelligence is one thing. Knowing the experiences, because obviously from your experiences you get the skill sets and level of your skills, and you can up your levels. But the one thing we all mention right now is your what we call appetencies. What you like, what are your interests? Because your interest is your driver to what do you want to do, and how do you in fact personalize your career. You don't have to be a manager, assistant manager, and then you grow up vertically and boringly to the top. You can do side moves, and I think we're all fascinated by the side moves, but creating that company that allows the side move to happen, just like Kaizen said, it means the change of culture is super important, but the interest and really captivating those interests is super important. And it's really one of the three things. In fact, those three pillars are to me in the platform, and it's something that should be really highlighted. So what do you want to do is a super important question.
Julie, you make a great point. If I could encapsulate what that is, it's like the idea of moving from the traditional logic of a ladder hierarchy to more like a lattice. You can go left to right, whatever direction makes sense. But I will also challenge and say that skills first companies and leading skills first companies, they know the work. The more you know the work, the more you know the skills you need. And then you can incentivize the right kind of talent within your pools that should be able to move in more of that lattice fashion. So they're not mutually exclusive. It's like, yes, you create agency in employees, and you want those people that have fungible skills and those that have the appetite to want to move. But then on the flip side of it, the more mature an organization is in removing the container of the job role and really thinking about the work, the more successful they'll be.
I love that. I think that also goes back to Mauricio's point earlier in the conversation when he said about defining the language in which you have conversations. And that goes for both, right? The language of how you define skills, but also define the work is also probably good to have that definition to have, again, especially when you have a global business, right? With different cultures, different languages, etc. It's super important that we're aligned on that.
Yeah, and that's sort of like clarify and understand really what's the demand today and the future demand of skills, and then with understanding what you have with your talent pool. So that's the supply, and then you fix that, solve for that problem.
Julie, a lot of people in the chat, some people have asked the question, you can never have this conversation without this question coming up, which is how do you calculate them and measure the ROI of skills? So we all get that question a lot. So if you could, and you're perfectly positioned to hear that a lot from customers as well.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously when you get a tool, you want to know what's going to be the value of the tool. How do I make sure that I get buy-in from senior management that this approach is the right approach? So obviously you want to be a business partner, and you come in with I think metrics, and from all the customers we have around the world, it's starting, and I think it's interesting. It depends on the maturity of how you are in your skills journey. So let's say the first few metrics are, how my people are engaged, how many skills are they declaring, per profile, because first you need to have that data, so it's like collecting a little gold dust all across, because you need to make that big treasure of skills. So collecting all those spots are important. But then once you move into the pure ROI, you want to see, what's my uptake in terms of internal mobility? Have I pushed up? We can see with our customers that we have 30% increase in internal mobility from, not having a tool, whether it's just, people talking to people or people going to job boards, to a tool that suggests dynamically based on your, experiences and skills, something that suggests you and push you towards mobility. Well, we know we have an uplift. So that uplift is super important, and you need to track it. You need also to put into consideration the recruitment. You'll probably won't do because you'll source internally your talent. Doesn't mean that if you're taking one talent, as Kaizen said, from the BU, well, maybe you need to replace him, but it's just different ballgame because your time to fill position is usually shorter. So you calculate those metrics, how much your employee that you just moved would have cost if you had recruited externally, how much time you saved, because maybe, the onboarding is not going to be 6 to 9 months, but it's only going to be 2 months for him to be efficient on the job. So that's another key metrics of ROI. Then you have also all the learning, because once you know all your skills within an organization, it's, I can be really good with my learning. And I think all your L&D's professional, for them, it's a gold mine to how I can be really good between the skills am I expecting on that job, the level of my employee and where I want him to be. And also what are the key skills? So where do I put my money and how do you optimize? So you can really track that. If you put metrics and KPIs at the beginning of your project saying, I want to optimize my learning budget by, maybe it's 10%, but I'm sure you can find it. And it's usually something we put, because skills is really the ground foundation for your learning plans. And then obviously you have the employee retention. The more people are staying, the better it is for you in terms of turnover and churn. The staffing, getting all those project missions, especially if you're in a consulting agency. I know that we have Bearing Point as the customer, the reduced time that you have between missions, and making sure you have the right consultant at the right time for the right mission is really key for them. So all those metrics are super important. And in the end, the final thing is the ROI of skills is also how efficient you'll be as an HR, how agile and time savings, because you'll probably have less interviews because you're doing an internal recruitment, and it's not going to take 5 or 6 steps to get that. Already the person, so you're going faster. So you're just reducing times. Plus, even in terms of performance reviews, the fact that you're doing skills, that continuous assessment of skills, etc., you already have a pretty good data set for you to really see, how the employee is doing, where do you want to take them further, and you have all their professional projects within the platform. So also, I think that's a really good productivity. So I think I've been a very...
That's pretty comprehensive.
Exactly. Good luck, panelists, to implement that.
I had a point on that actually, because it was, while you were speaking, it just kind of reminded me of organizations I've spoken to, or maybe less mature, or organizations that don't have these, or haven't doubled down on this and invested on this. And back to the human element, they all do some form of skills development or mobility, but they do it in very basic forms. So for example, someone questioning the ROI, well, actually, most managers are quite selfish in the thinking. They say, okay, who's going to be my successor? And they can measure as an organization, you can measure your promotions and say, well, technically that is some form of mobility. You're moving someone from one role to another, and you got to backfill, or you might not backfill and choose a different skill set. And so the ROI is, as you said, Julie, all the points are there, plus just the speed, right? You get a variance of different options then.
If I could add to this conversation, I have a bit of a hot take. My intention when I think about the ROI around skills, is not just about ROI. When you think about ROI, it's about like financial return on investment. I try to also shift it to more of an ROE perspective, which is more around like, how are you measuring the effectiveness of the outcome of the actual trainings and learnings and aligning the skills there. Because when you think about the things that Julie had mentioned, it's like, yes, speaking the language of the business is very important. If you speak the language of like cost saves, to the point around HR and the replacement of talent, efficiency gains, meaning that if we're sourcing people internally, their time to productivity will likely be a bit shorter. I even think about it further, that once you start to leverage skill intelligence, when you think about companies that deal with a lot of rifts and downsizing of talent, when you have a mature skill intelligence, now you can redistribute talent more effectively because you have a better sense of skill adjacencies. And so the combination of understanding the work and knowing what skills you have and having a culture where people are volunteering and sharing that information, I think it turns the HR capability from being more thought of as a cost center to a real strategic partner. And that to me is how you really start to nail it down. But part of that is the mindset shift, going back to that again around the expectations. And culturally, a lot of managers and a lot of business units, they're like, hey, we've trained people or we have skills, therefore they should perform. And there's so many other factors that go around that. So I feel like when you start to have skill intelligence and talent intelligence, you also have a responsibility to partner with those business leads and those leaders and also educate them on how you can serve in those more business-centric kinds of activities.
Yeah, let me just jump in quickly to Kaysen's point. I think it was last week we were having a conversation pretty much related to what you were just mentioning, Kaysen, is we need to shift from this conversation of constantly looking for cost reduction or cost avoidance or cost efficiency to a conversation where it's more about the value creation. And it can be truly linked or directly to the creation of the value that any project or any endeavor of the company creates, because you require that talent. And if you decompose it into those skills in it or any other part related to the people, you can really, put it down to the value piece. And in our case, we're very used to being this cost center or focusing on, it's sort of like unclear, this gray area, because we haven't been that focused on the specifics on how we create this value. And I think that's where we need to move forward, because we now have more data, we now have more technology and more ways to really connect and have these arguments of causality. And I think we can get there.
I think both those points are just made. All of those points are made is if you're looking for a business case of how you sell this to your leadership team, just listen to those last couple of responses again, and talk to your leaders through that lens. You're going to get much more engagement and much more. They're much more excited about it if you could link it directly to the impact and the outcomes as well, because that's kind of really what they're going to be focusing on. I do think there's a conversation to be had around this whole thing of equity. We all worked in those organizations where the manager's best friend gets promoted, right? Or someone in the team gets promoted because of X, right? Whereas I think one of the amazing things I'm excited about with the talent marketplace is to give the opportunity for underrepresented talent as well in organizations, and to make sure we can minimize as much unconscious bias as possible. So I do think there's a conversation there that no one really talks about enough, in my opinion, that's important, especially as we have hybrid and distributed teams where that talent's not always seen.
It goes to that, Chris, it goes to that kind of idea of pie promotion. So performance only equates to 10% of your success. Impression equates to 30% of your success. And then 60% is based on exposure.
Yes.
And that's why we have to have all these different things to counter that one thing that's just constantly there. Because as human beings, we have this bias. So that's why all these things that have been mentioned are so important. Because if we don't have them, you're left with that.
Yeah.
Which is, I know that person, so I'll do them a favor.
Yeah, and it's easier, right? That's why people take they take the path of least resistance. And we just naturally do that. Kaysen, I know you unmuted yourself. Jump in.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point around the diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces. And it makes me think about how in our seats, how we work best to partner with our diversity practitioners to help mitigate some of that bias. And where I think there's opportunities, there's also bias in our data. So these kinds of things, when you start thinking about the skill intelligence and that kind of work, it's about making sure it's not about having the best data, but really making sure you're investing in better data and having those partnerships as you go along in this journey, I think helps make these kinds of initiatives with emerging technologies more powerful. And I know in my own work, we work with legal compliance, ethics groups, really just to understand those implications. and each company is in a different place. And also look at the legislations depending on where you are globally in relation to using like emerging technologies for that kind of work.
Well, we covered a lot in the last, 45 minutes as well. Before I let everyone go, I want to kind of just ask each of you for your sort of parting piece of advice that you'd give to everyone. And then, and also where can people connect with each of you if they want to say hi? For us, we're really about building community, and the conversations that happen after these sessions are the ones really where the magic happens. Julie, I'm going to pick on you first. What would you be a parting piece of advice?
I think for everyone who came on board and they really wanted to know about how you make sure your talent experience across regions, how do you make sure it's okay? We covered a lot between, making sure DEI is covered, making sure everyone has the same visibility, and how you make sure all the skills, across all the BUs, the regions, etc., etc. But the things that remains for me is skills intelligence is a foundation. I think it was Mauricio saying that it's the foundation. It's the one thing that will help you do so much later on. So embarking into that journey, I think all the analysts are just talking about it. Everyone's talking about it. But the how do I do it is super important. And in fact, it's quite interesting because we all talked about how we do that. So there's loads of really good examples, loads of things that can help you calculate, prove the value, demonstrate, build your project, talk to the team, talk to me. You can get me on LinkedIn, but it's to me, it's a fascinating, it's the start of a big journey. So yeah, it's what I will remember for that.
So two final thoughts for me and takeaways is, so skill-based or skills intelligence is required if you want to stay relevant in a workplace, if you want to stay relevant in the industry you're playing. So it's just a fact. I see it that way. If you want to stay relevant, you gotta be playing this game. And for me, the other one, going to the last conversation and the last comments with Kaysen mainly, and with you, Chris, and the rest, is think of talent as a way to create, capture, and deliver value for both your organization and the communities. That's actually the essence of it. And it's through talent that you create the company, that you capture it, and that you will deliver it. So for me, that's a very important takeaway.
So I've got 3 real quick points. So the first is, for HR leaders, focus on human-shaped experiences. So you have like talent attraction. Do you also have talent shaping? The second would be automation. Everything needs to be automated. We move in a really fast-paced environment. We know technology changes every other month. So focused always, anything you do, try to be as automated as possible in anything you do. Is it saving us time, not adding more time? And the third one linking to that is continuous learning. So whatever you do, whatever you implement, make sure it's not some, no offense to Workday, but some sort of like work implementation that lasts for 2 years. Try to do something that's going to be iterative, quite fast-paced, MVP, to move with the times, because before you know it, with AI coming in place and everything else getting more and more accessible, you're going to need to move fast. So always continuously learn.
Amazing.
No worries. Yeah. No, Yaz makes such great points. When I think about skills intelligence and having a skill first strategy, really it's about harmonizing. So for me, there's like 5 points I encapsulate from this conversation, is that make sure that when investing in skill intelligence that you're solving problems. Understand the problem that your skills first strategy will have for the organization. And then to that point, based on where you are, build a foundation. Look for those quick wins, lead with value. And that way you can convince the business of the scalable investment. I would say third point is design for change. Change is the only constant right now. Everything to what Yaz is saying, we're moving a mile a minute. So it's like to start design with the change in mind. That way you'll be able to evolve rapidly depending on what's happening in the marketplace. I won't underpin this enough, but good data wins. Not the best data, good data wins. So prioritize trying to work on your data as you start to play with these ideas. And then last but not least, it's really like investing in the culture, because adapting to a skill-based way of working is really hard. And you have to be thoughtful. And the rest, even though there are some high-performing organizations that do this or have been doing it, I don't think there's one that's really like an absolute rock star in this, because we now have the technologies and the environment where I think in the next 12 to 24 months, this is really going to take off.
Yeah.
So buckle up.
Yeah.
Wow.